So today I have the pleasure of moderating a panel of some of the people who are working on the governance side of the CNCF. And these people put a lot of hours into making sure that the processes and the procedures and the transparency and all that good stuff happens. And so I'd like to invite them out. I'm going to slow this down a little bit because a few of them are not quite ready back there yet. But one of the things that really we want to make sure we get through today in this is that you all get a chance to ask questions of this board. It's sort of an ask me anything as well. I have a few questions to set it up and to get the conversation going, but please raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone and ask you to come up and ask your questions as well. So without further ado, we'll see who's ready back there and bring out our contestants. Contestants number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, hopefully. We've got Ken Owens from Cisco. We've got Aaron coming from Mesosphere. Oops. And Doug from IBM. Brandon from CoreOS. And there's 2 others coming. And I stalled as long as I could. If you hear a flush in the background, it's not me. There's one. All right.
Right in time.
We're only missing one person, so that's all right. And if he runs up on stage late, that's okay, because he works with Red Hat, and I'll just put in the Red Hat comments. So the CNCF's mission has been helping to get this new computing, wonderful computing paradigm off the ground and getting the messaging and the enthusiasm behind the adoption of cloud native. But we all have different opinions on what cloud native is and all of that. So I'm going to get these guys to introduce themselves and maybe talk a little bit first about what their idea is of what cloud native means to them as they introduce themselves, and then I'm going to hit them with some questions. So Joseph.
Sure. So my name is Joseph Jacks, and my entry into this space was through a company called Kismatic that I helped start, and we were sort of the first pure play company behind Kubernetes. So spent a lot of time with the Kubernetes project. Joined a company called Apprenda, which is an exciting platform as a service vendor based in New York, and I'm also fairly involved in CNCF across a few different initiatives there. My take on cloud native. Yeah, it's a really big question. I think cloud native means a lot of different things. I actually wouldn't postulate to say that I have a fully clear, concrete definition of what cloud native means. I actually think I'm still sort of sorting it out myself.
As we all are.
Yeah. So, but I think Craig McLuckie codified it pretty well with container package, dynamically scheduled, and microservices oriented. I think that definitely embodies some things about cloud native. I think cloud native is really trying to sort of get people behind this idea of distributed systems as a first-class set of principles when you start building applications and deploying services in a modern way. And I think we're, as an industry, starting to get much better around defining what that means. But yeah, that's kind of my general take.
That's a good first stab at it. Yep. Brendan.
Hi, so I'm Brandon Phillips. I'm the CTO and co-founder of CoreOS. The way my background, I kind of arrived at this space. I started my career as a Linux kernel developer. And of course, like being an engineer, you have this imagining that your product is perfect and everyone's using it in the perfect way in production. And then I worked at Rackspace on a large distributed system and realized just how difficult it was to bring real-world infrastructure that is distributed across multiple data centers to production and to operate those things at scale. And that's what motivated us to create CoreOS and focus on these problems of how do you ensure that you're able to build an application as you wish, build out infrastructure to support that application in a way that can scale, that can be managed, that human beings without the use of huge number of spreadsheets can operate it, and that's kind of how we arrived here. As for what cloud native means to me, I think Joseph has given a great overview. One of the things that I am excited about is the outcome of cloud native, the idea that we're able to better spend the electricity and the resource investment we make in computing today. When I was working at Rackspace, and I'm sure every other cloud provider and infrastructure team can corroborate, is that machines are super bored. They're just blowing out compute out the back end as heat. And so being able to use these patterns to better densely pack compute workloads, I think is a pretty exciting outcome out of this style of infrastructure.
Perfect. All right. Well, our last dude has arrived, but go right ahead, Doug, and introduce yourself.
I'm Doug Davis, an SCSM at IBM. Been working on open source and standards now for about 16 years. I've worked on various open source projects all the way back in Apache, OpenStack, Cloud Foundry, Docker, now Kubernetes. So I'm doing this open source stuff for a while now. To me, cloud native, the very, very short answer is containers. But the broader answer is, laugh. But the broader answer is sort of the things that it brings to us. Because for years, we've been talking about things like, treating VMs as cattle, not pets, and all the 12-factor applications. We've been talking about things like that for many, many years, having repeatable build processes, repeatable test stuff. And we've talked about it, but it's never really become a reality. And for some reason, everything started kind of converging between containers, cloud, and everybody just sort of jumping on board to a point where it's like, web services is SOA on steroids, right? SOA isn't new, but web services is like the cool way to say it. Forgive me. So that to me is what cloud native is all about. It's taking this new, not even new, but it's the adoption of containers and wrapping it around all the stuff that we've been talking about for years, but actually making it a reality, The CI/CD pipelines, because everybody today, you wouldn't even think about doing an open source project without the Travis setups around it and all that stuff. That's actually relatively new. From my experience when I first started doing open source, if they did test cases, that was like a huge gold star. Now it's like you don't even think about doing a PR without a test case. So it's a whole new world, and that's to me what cloud native is all about, is doing the things we've been talking about for years and actually making it real.
Perfect. Aaron.
Hi, yeah, I'm Aaron Williams. I head up advocacy and our community efforts at Mesosphere. So we just open sourced our DCOS solution, and so I'm leading up that community as well. For me, cloud native is these things we've talked about. So it is sort of a technical definition. There is this notion of kind of combining these ideals that we've had for a while into something that is tangible. But if we do those things well, it also creates a market. And to me, that's one of the interesting outcomes of this whole thing. It's not just about having a great technology stack, but it's also about, are we coming together to create a market that we can all figure out how we live in? And being able to define ourselves based on that market, I think, is so helpful, not just for us as platform developers, not just to be able to say, this is how DCOS fits into that space, but also for end users and for all these different constituents that have a perspective on that market. So my hope is, and maybe we're not quite there yet, I think, but my hope is that part of the outcome of CNCF and the value of CNCF is that we end up in that space where we can all agree on this is the market that we're all talking about.
More on that later.
Yep.
Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken Owens. I'm the CTO at Cisco's Cloud Services and Platforms Group. Keep changing our names, I can't think about it. But I'm one who's kind of started some of the mantle work a few years ago. Before that, when I was at CenturyLink, I did Dr. Docker, which became Panamax. And so kind of been playing in this space for the last 3.5, 4 years. To me, cloud native is really more of a software architecture. And it's kind of looking at hardware and software components together. And kind of how you would, knowing that what's happened in the past and all the things we've talked about on the stage so far are true, that this is kind of a natural evolution, we're not going to be done after this, right? We can't say this is now cloud native, we're done, we can sit back and our jobs are finished, right? There's always going to be something different. And so being extensible and making sure that your software practices encompass change as part of the norm, I think is a big part of cloud native. It's not just a static, develop it once, deploy it, and let it just sit there and run for the next 10 years. It's going to change often, and how do you take into account those changes and the impact of those changes is what cloud native is a lot about.
A lot of different opinions on what cloud native is, and I'm going to let Chris introduce yourself, and I asked them all while you were still scrambling backstage to tell us what you thought cloud native meant.
Chris Wright, and I'm the VP and Chief Technologist at Red Hat. And for me, cloud native is a lifestyle. I live in Portland, Oregon, so I'm not actually kidding. It is a lifestyle. But what I really mean is cloud native is a set of technologies. It's a set of practices. I think you've heard a lot of pieces of a common theme here. We're solving problems that businesses have today. The world is really changing rapidly. And part of what we're doing with cloud native is focusing tools and processes so that humans can do the interesting part, and we really are evolving the state of the art of our lives. So that's, it's kind of a bold statement, but what I mean by that is new technologies can really change how we interoperate with the world and with each other. So it wasn't long ago that we had no mobile phones at all, and then phones have become a pretty much ubiquitous part of our lives. As you imagine kind of that same evolution of technology having a similar kind of impact on our daily lives, I think cloud native is the foundation that's helping us continue to accelerate this innovation, business model changes, new technologies all kind of coming together. And so it's not just living in Portland having a cloudy lifestyle, but
a little sip of espresso every once in a while,
Yeah.
and a little beard.
That's right.
That's gotta have my beard going here. So good. Thank you all for that. And there were a good variety here of answers to that question. There's a thread moving through it. But now this is the TOC and the governing board people, and I want to get a little bit more into what the CNCF means to you, and I'm going to pick on Aaron here at Mesosphere a little bit, because we have Kubernetes and Prometheus under the umbrella right now at CNCF, and what does it mean that you, Mesosphere, belongs to CNCF, and then separately, what does it mean for DCOS, the CNCF, and isn't there just a little bit of competition going on here?
I've never heard this question before. This is a great question.
Never.
I'm just kidding. Of course, yeah. So look, and I think it's a good way to think about sort of, when you think about why Mesosphere participates in a group like CNCF, that may help to define kind of what it is as well. I feel like we should all get sort of the mission statement tattooed on us somewhere, and Joseph kind of mentioned the core pieces of that. It's microservices, it's applications running in containers, it's orchestration and automation of those applications. So those core fundamental pieces of what this new computing paradigm is are very relevant to us. If you look at what we do with DCOS as an open source project, and if you look at what we do with our enterprise products, those things are the embodiment of those principles. And so I think for us to participate in this, it's really about coming together with these leaders in the industry to create this market and to be able to help reduce some of the confusion, I think, around what it means to be cloud native. We all have sort of this goal to get everyone on board with that single market and inside that single market and with that single definition. But that might be the easy answer, actually. I think the more interesting answer, for me at least, is looking at who else is participating. And one of the reasons we participate is because this group of people, this CNCF, is so diverse. It's not just about cloud providers or platform providers or ISVs or end users or blah, blah, blah. It's about all of us coming together to provide opinions and perspectives on this topic. And so, for us, for Mesosphere, that's one of the things that makes it so exciting for us, makes it why we're so active and excited about the future of CNCF.
Yeah, so I think Chris Anzik said it in some announcement this past week at LinuxCon about the diversity, the number of startups that are coming out of the space that are based on Kubernetes, and lots of announcements came out this past week. So one of the healthy things about this marketplace and this group of projects that are working together is the diversity that's coming out now.
Definitely true for us.
Yeah. So you mentioned goals, so I'm going to pick on IBM and Doug here too, and then all of each of you, to think about what your goals are for the CNCF going forward.
Right, so when the CNCF...
Aside from promoting the CNCF itself.
Right, and I was going to say, at the first governing board meeting at CNCF, there was a lot of discussion about there being confusion in the industry. And I think that confusion has lots of different aspects to it, and I think, yes, CNCF should be there to help promote cloud-native technologies, clear up some of the confusion that's out there. But the one thing that I would really love to see, and I don't really think we talk about it much, and I think it's more of a point-in-time statement because the CNCF is so new, but I'm hoping that the CNCF becomes a little bit more like what we're seeing going on in the OCI, where you get a group of vendors together and they're there to develop a joint specification, right? And then reference implementations to that. And so I'm hoping that the CNCF, while maybe not necessarily formally agreeing on specification output, gets some sort of harmonization because we have all the key players in the room. And I think one of the confusion for people is which piece of competing technology do they use? That's all that's out there. And if we can help the industry stop bickering over the APIs, which hopefully aren't that different, if we can get agreement on things like APIs, fight over the implementation of those APIs. As a goal, I just want that level of harmonization across the industry from the CNCF, because I think by having all the players at the table alone could help foster that. Without the CNCF, you may not even get them talking to one another. So I'd like to see that more collaboration there.
And I'm all about cross-community collaboration is the key to this, and really keeping that open conversation going. So Ken, I see you nodding your head. What do you have for goals for the CNCF?
So on the CNCF, I'm on the Technical Oversight Committee, and one of our goals is to really help sort of incubate projects that want to be part of this cloud-native movement. Maybe they have pieces of it that fit, maybe they don't, so kind of help shepherd them, help them identify how to be part of this overarching cloud-native set of capabilities and projects that we want to bring together.
So you mentioned projects, and the CNCF, and I think Dan Cohn put a whole list of the new potential projects that the TOC is looking at, everything from things that are near and dear to my heart, like XCD and Flannel and open tracing and that. So there's a whole list of things the TOC is considering now and reviewing, and not all of them will make the cut and become in there. But are there any things that you guys are seeing that are missing, or is there one that's a favorite of yours that you'd really think that we should? Yeah, I was thinking, how do we get Apache Foundation to let go of Mesos and bring it over and get it in the CNCF, and then we'll all be happy, right? But aside from trying to figure out that divorce settlement, are there projects, maybe Chris, that you're thinking that we really should be looking at that we're not yet?
Well, I think a couple of things on this topic. One is, from a umbrella project point of view, we shouldn't set a bar for the CNCF to measure itself on how many projects do we have. It's really a negative incentive. It's kind of pushing us in the wrong direction, in my opinion. And then, it's a nice list of projects. I think we've got some really promising prospects coming in, but I'd almost take a step back and say we're still, and we'll probably explore some of that on this panel today, we're still trying to define what cloud native is from an architectural point of view. And the better clarity we can provide from that perspective, it will help us see where there's good matches for projects that exist, or maybe more importantly, white spaces that are work to be done. And we've had some experience with this in OpenShift, where we're absolutely leveraging Docker and Kubernetes under the hood, but we're also closing gaps in the OpenShift layer that don't exist in other projects. And so I know that everything is new and evolving, and I think that it's a great list of projects. I'd love to ensure that we're kind of taking a holistic view and looking especially for gaps and white spaces.
Okay. Brendan, have you got any thoughts on what you'd like to see besides etcd?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of, going back to what Chris is talking about, I think there's a number of things we should kind of think through what we can do inside the CNCF. There's natural collaboration that is happening, say, between Prometheus and Kubernetes that is happening just because the engineers see constructively there's places that they can be working together. I'd like to think through how do we actually make that more structured, and how do we encourage that, and what are the processes that ensure that projects actually become aligned with each other over time, which I think is similar to what Doug is saying. I don't know if we have to go as deep down the road of thinking about standardization, but perhaps just how do we encourage that these two things actually make sense together when put into the same infrastructure. And then the other piece is I think one thing that the CNCF has a unique opportunity to do is that post Apache Foundation style projects that need documentation, hosting, and mailing lists, et cetera, there's Google groups and GitHub that handle those things today. A lot of these projects are maybe single vendor projects that we're considering, or they're projects that may not have the best structure around making decisions and that sort of thing. And I think CNCF could not necessarily dictate, but at least help and encourage certain best practices of how you actually come to decisions, how you make processes happen, how you make releases and that sort of thing. So I think there are projects are important, but I think what is the value that the CNCF can uniquely provide by adopting a project is something that needs to be sorted.
So one of the value propositions for the CNCF, like Apache, is being a neutral host, and that. But Apache has a lot of other things that they add on in governance and processes and things like that. And from what I've been listening at the CNCF, and I'm not on the Board of Governors or the TOC, is that we're kind of hands-off on the projects. We let the Kubernetes and the Prometheus folks govern themselves and mediate their disputes and figure out who's going to be a committer. Are you suggesting that the CNCF should start putting in some best practices around that, or move that forward?
Well, I think the point is that it's there are things that the CNCF can uniquely do as like an umbrella organization, and we need to figure out what those things are. It is it's clearly not offering like hosting services, and it's not necessarily about like choosing the one solution that will always be correct. So what is that thing? And I think the Prometheus and Kubernetes thing is a good example of what could emerge. But what is it? How can we like actually articulate that and provide that as a repeatable practice inside of the organization?
So one of the new things that the CNCF has done is offer the cluster. With Intel's and Switch's help to create this cluster for us. At OpenShift, we've taken advantage and blown up through 1,000 nodes and scaled things up. And that's almost unique to any foundation. I'm not sure if Apache does that or anybody else I've ever heard of that. So those kinds of actual tangible things, and a little bit of funding is offered to projects. But it has been so far sort of a neutral hands-off approach to the Kubernetes and Prometheus. And so that would be a bit of a switch in culture, or what we've been pushing out so far. So
there's some actual justification behind that, which is especially when we're trying to bring in some initial well-established projects, if we create a hurdle that says, by the way, you have to adopt our governance policy, we're pushing people away. So I think one very likely outcome is, as we create some inertia and momentum, we can distill out some best practices and try to share those with the related projects. So we're not necessarily dictating from a CNCF here's the only way you can do governance, but it's kind of divining those from our experience and helping projects find a good path to.
I heard somebody say it was CNCF is more tools than rules, which I thought was, okay, cute, but clever, at least. And it came down to, it's not even just sort of the cluster, but it's also things like the end user groups that are being created around it. It's the meetups. It's all those sort of avenues of being able to connect to a community that I think CNCF is doing a good job of starting to create and foster. And for either a member of the community or for these projects that are coming into the community, having those resources at your fingertips, being able to go out to a community, a large community of people that are ready to hear about sort of what you're doing and how you're doing it is extremely valuable.
Yeah. So Joseph, you've started KubeCon. Thank you very much. One of the most awesome conferences ever. Lots of fun, and we're going to do that again in Seattle shortly, and set the 8th and 9th of November. So everybody please come to that as well. But, and so we've got a bit of a community around Kubernetes going, more than a bit.
Just a bit.
Just a bit. What do you see as some of the inhibitors to continuing to this, or inhibitors to the adoption of cloud native?
Yeah, so I guess that goes back to what is cloud native.
It always comes back to that.
Sure,
right?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big question. Not so sure how to answer that. So inhibitors, I just think maybe kind of teasing out more specificity there, taking Kubernetes, right, as an example project. I think one of the things that could inhibit the continued momentum and success of Kubernetes as a sort of a project that embodies a lot of what cloud native is, I think, is potentially unnecessarily increasing the complexity of the project. And Brandon and I were actually talking briefly about this, but just at a high level, I think it all comes down to what natively gets built into Kubernetes that may not necessarily need to get built in Kubernetes. Yeah. And I think CNCF could actually play a role in that in terms of drawing some of the lines there. Yeah. So today, there's already been quite a lot of conversation around sort of organizing the mechanics of how contributions actually unfold to committing code to Kubernetes, as well as affecting the roadmap and adjusting the release cadences and making substantive contributions that might affect many other portions of the project and many other critical components of the project. So I'm actually a really big fan of something that Brandon has proposed recently on this, which is sort of a lightweight incubation process for Kubernetes, which really, if you unpack what the proposal outlines, which I won't get into in detail, but it's a fairly comprehensive proposal. It really gives a lot more clarity to people who want to contribute code to this extremely fast, essentially escape velocity level open source project, and mitigates a lot of the confusion, I think, around what Kubernetes is today and what will it evolve into within the next 9 to 18 months. And I think that's actually very related to what the inhibitors could be for something successful like this open source project.
Yeah.
So getting a handle on a lot of those things, I think a lot of the lessons that can be learned in that can get translated into what CNCF ends up codifying for people. I'm not a huge fan of standards. I think standards are very limiting to people, but best practices and guidance and some of the aspects of community development with the open source projects themselves, and offering those insights to the projects without sort of dictating the structure of the engineering culture or the upstream open source frameworks.
So the balance of maintaining the velocity of the release cycles and the innovation in the product without becoming the big tent.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not really clear on what some of the implications are to big tent, but I think those are just some of the quick ideas around what we should be careful with in terms of consequences and inhibitors to continued growth. Because there are a lot of risks right now with Kubernetes. As the project's gotten so much more successful, tons of people want to contribute to it. And it's actually kind of an interesting paradoxical problem because we actually need way more people to contribute to the project, but we need it to be done in an organized and coordinated way, and not in a sort of ad hoc, crazy, free-form sort of way. So I don't know if you have any other.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome to see the huge amount of traction and like the excitement around adding new features and new extension points to the platform. And I think it goes back to the conceptual consistency and ease of use of the platform that people are able to say, oh yeah, it works great for me, but now I want to add these like 2 other widgets onto the side of it. So it's exciting to see it, but we also just need to make sure that we don't end up with like the API gigantic sprawl that has, to a large degree, caused like the Linux kernel to be so successful over the last 25 years, is that APIs were added very slowly and with like a lot of thought, even probably less thought than we might have hoped. Like we're on like dupe 4 or something in the Linux kernel, but it's another thing. But like you want to have like, you want the excitement, but you also need mechanisms like through incubation or other things to say, let's hold on for a second on this one, let's feel it out for the next 6, 12 months, so that we don't have like yet another widget that we have to put up on a slide, that we have to put into our architecture diagrams and that sort of thing.
The CNCF has an architecture diagram. I hear there was a lot of conversation about that architecture diagram and getting to that. I'm not even sure there's agreement on it at the moment, right? But
not yet.
Actually, I know there's not agreement on it. But I also see with Kubernetes in particular is as it gets more widespread adoption and we get more experience with different use cases and best practices for deploying it, from whether it's Tectonic or OpenShift or Kubernetes in the raw, we're starting to see people bring in their like high performance. How do we make Kubernetes the best place for high performance workloads? So the tweaks that we need to do to specific workloads. I think incubating those and being careful about that is really going to be key for some of that. I see you nodding down there, Ken, and it's not nodding off. I know it's been a long week, but do you see any other inhibitors for the CNCF, any roadblocks ahead?
I think my biggest concern is in a community, if you have bad actors, you can really, split the community up or cause the community to have, issues that you can't overcome very easily. And so I think that's one of my concerns is making sure that we act as a community, not as individuals that have an agenda that want to push the community one way or the other. So that's been my biggest, that's the thing I've been kind of making sure we keep a stable, consistent messaging for CNCF and not for any individual company.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things about managing a widespread distributed community, and especially with so many different players in it. But I think so far we've done a pretty good job.
I was going to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think we're doing?
We're doing really well, like an 8.
So far.
8.
We haven't
Pretty
tried
good.
anything too crazy yet, so but that's all right. Anyone else have an inhibitor that they want to bring up? Okay. So there was one other thing. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing users who are starting to adopt cloud native? So maybe, Brandon,
Sure.
you had a couple of thoughts about that earlier.
Yeah, so one of the first inhibitors and the one that we're attacking along with the Kubernetes community like head on is that operations teams see this diagram of software that they see the advantage. They see the advantage of being able to scale their thing, having a consistent API across different infrastructures, but then they see the diagram of software that they have to manage and operate, and then they have lots of questions around like, how is that monitored? How do I upgrade it? Like, who's upgrading it? When do I upgrade it? Is it safe to upgrade it when my workloads are going? And so these are things that we're tackling with a bunch of other folks in upstream of like, here are the APIs for upgrading of the system. Here are the APIs for adding and removing extension points, whether that's networking or storage or service discovery. And I think that's going to be just laying that foundation from the beginning. Right? The project is very young. We're 1 year out from 1.0. And being able to have those patterns of not just the advantages to the the application teams that are deploying on top, but the infrastructure team that actually has to manage it. I think that's going to be pretty critical because those are the folks that are going to have to like sign off on wearing the pager eventually. And if we don't get them early on, they're going to be like pretty well in their right, pretty well wanting to avoid the technologies.
So Chris, what do you think about that? What are the user challenges you're seeing?
It starts with being clear on what the value is. So I still hit questions all the time of why containerize. We deal a lot with enterprises. Enterprises have a lot of legacy involved, and so they're not even fully virtualized. And so one of the things we can do is really be clear about containerization and virtualization have a lot of shared concepts, but they're not just sort of redundant or an immediate evolution of concepts. There's some really fundamental differences that helping people understand why, like what's the value. I hear all the time, like it sounds like I see the kind of holy grail, sprinkle pixie dust, and I'm magically going faster, and everybody wants to go faster. But I don't actually have that problem. So help me understand. And complexity is the other thing that comes up because we spend, from an engineering point of view, we spend a lot of time building awesome technology, and it's critical to have user input from developer perspective, but also user input from operations teams, because we do see this regularly. You get the demo is awesome. Day 1, day 2 is a train wreck, and you don't get a second chance for quite a while. So helping users understand the value and see how they're going to kind of live with this infrastructure that they're building out that's going to need to itself evolve over time. Probably the two important things that come to mind.
From a Mesosphere perspective, what are you seeing for users' challenges here?
Well, so I want to double back on the second day operations because that to me is super critical. We hear that all the time. Sort of, it's not just about how do I adopt this new shiny thing you have, but how do I actually use it in production, in anger. So I think that's such an important topic and something that we as CNCF can do a better job, frankly, of helping to lay out. Here's the challenges that are coming. Here's what you should be ready for. I think the other thing that was mentioned was sort of being able to talk about CNCF or talk about cloud native not as a sort of ambiguous thing, but instead something very tangible, as you were saying before. I think this isn't just about going in and saying you should adopt cloud native. It's about, hey, I'm going to help you solve this set of problems. And so as we start to talk more about, okay, what are those problems? How can we put together the use cases that help illuminate how we solve those problems? I'd be happy if we did a few of them really well and we were able to focus as a community on doing a few of them really well, rather than trying to necessarily boil the ocean. I hear a lot from folks, be careful, don't boil the ocean, don't try and do everything for everybody. Let's focus on a few things, let's go off and solve those few things very well. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're going to face over the next 6, 9, 12 months.
What about you, Doug? What are the challenges you're seeing?
Well, it's actually a good and a bad thing in the sense that there's almost too much choice out there, right? You got Kubernetes, Docker with the 112 orchestration stuff, you got Mesosphere. And I think customers are very confused about which path to go for some of these technologies, right? There's a lot of choices out there, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Choice is good. And like I said, it'd be nice if the CNCF could encourage some level of harmonization. And earlier you were asking about, what is one of the things you want CNCF to sort of look at? I'd want them to look at something from the customer perspective, right? Can we figure out some way as a community to say, yeah, we may have different points of view in terms of the underlying technology, but can we, from the customer's point of view, say, take your one application definition and be able to deploy it in multiple places, Docker versus Kubernetes, and not necessarily have to rock the entire customer's, or the customer's entire world just to make that happen, right? So I think that would help a lot, because I think a lot of customers are very skittish right now. I think they're hoping one person or one company kind of bubbles to the top, and I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, there was a lot of conversation, I know, over the past week and at other CNCF events about the CNCF is not about picking winners.
Right.
From the outside, it may look like it, that we pick Kubernetes and crowned it the winner, or we're going to create the new stack or whatever. But in some senses, what we're doing is we're creating an infinite array of possibilities, which is infinitely confusing when you're in an enterprise IT operations group and you're trying to say, well, this is what I'm going to peg our entire careers on for the next
Right.
10 years.
And I don't think we should necessarily pick winners, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to expose our customers to all those variabilities. Out there. If we minimize those to some extent, I think they'd be a little happier. Then they don't have to feel the pressure of possibly getting locked into one solution that may not actually be the right one for them.
So Kubernetes anywhere.
That's one option.
All right. So we have quite a bit of time left too, and if people have questions in the audience, please just speak. You have one here? I see a hand. Do we have a microphone?
No.
Or just, yes, here comes
Here it
the
comes.
microphone. So let's ask a couple of the.
Hi. Excuse me. Doug mentioned the application definition, and this is something I was really curious about is, do you see as a role of the CNCF as defining that, creating that application specification? Like OCI is creating one for runtime and for image, but if you've got an application that's composed of 50 different types of containers that have to be connected in how many different ways, how do you decide how to roll that out if you're an enterprise software vendor, say? You want to be able to sell that to be deployed within the customer's cloud as opposed to having to bring along your own control plane. Do you see that as a role for CNCF, is defining that application manifest or specification?
Well, there's 6 of us up here, so you probably get, 7 different opinions. But we actually thought about this in the beginning, and we wrote down initially that, yes, it's in scope. And I think the challenge is, and so I personally do believe it's in scope, and I think it's actually, I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it's that top-down view that actually is what makes this whole thing usable. I think maybe between that and well-defined services, those are probably the 2 most important pieces to me to focus on. The challenge is you risk going down the super abstract DSL that can do everything, and then it doesn't get adopted because it's too complex and nobody can use it, or it's actually really designed to be a Meso-specific thing or a Kubernetes-specific thing, and it hasn't really achieved the right level of abstraction. And I'm pretty confident we don't know how to do it perfectly yet. But I do think we should strive, and I think it's a very important target focus that we should have in CNCF.
I mean, because a lot of people would have said Docker with the Docker image wouldn't have been possible. Yet they've managed to standardize that to a certain extent. Forgive me for using the S word, but yes, standardize it to a certain extent. So it's not, I don't think it's inconceivable that we can move up the stack. We just may have to go slow, as Brendan was saying. You don't want to go too quickly, but, and as Chris was saying, I think we should at least try.
I think one of the things to get there iteratively is to take this idea of a pod, which is the sort of the first class unit of isolation for an application in Kubernetes. It's a collection of containers. And get that to be adopted as a first class abstraction in these other systems. And so there's actually a recent proposal in Marathon to have this idea of a pod built into Marathon, which is really exciting. Docker Swarm, there's lots of conversations in that community. And so if there was a common abstraction at that layer, I think that would be a really good iterative step forward to then sort of start to look at how do we solve communication, discovery, and secret management, configuration, and all these other things that really are required to build sort of how do you take an application and make it portable across these different.
Yeah, and I think. Oh.
Yeah, I'm done.
I think also we need to understand what are the types of applications that are being deployed on these infrastructures. So one of the things that we're talking about at KubeCon is like managing a complex application like etcd, which is a distributed database on top of Kubernetes APIs. And I think it's really easy to imagine building an application definition that's, it's super useful deploying WordPress, but actually that's not the application.
Not useful example.
Right. That's like not the application these companies care about. I mean, I talk to customers where they have like multi-tiered custom caching structures with sharding and replication. It's like, we're probably not going to use the same application definition that modeled WordPress like perfectly in order to make them successful. And I think that's something that we probably need to start out with first before even thinking about what is the JSON schema for this thing is what are probably the 4 applications that we actually feel like we can confidently want to model? Like, is it a distributed database, maybe a like 2-tier app, and et cetera? And I don't think we, at least in my experience, every single customer right now is a beautiful and unique flower, but we really don't have like this good language around that. And that's something Joseph and I talked about earlier. And I think it's an important thing that we need to sort.
So we may let 1,000 applications bloom, but we really want to get down to 4 to 5 real good workload use cases that we know we do, and we do really well. Mm-hmm. Is there another question? I saw one more hand up there.
Sort of extension to the question gentleman asked, and in part my question is addressed by your responses. But I work for Vodafone, and as an end user of the cloud computing environment, and whose softwares are often delivered by vendors, and we don't write our own for majority of use cases. We do find that traditional vendors in need of some design patterns at an application architecture level to gain maximum out of cloud, and which is what I'd imagine cloud native is how do you take an application? What are the design patterns underpinning a software which would make it run well on cloud? Now, the hyperscale companies have done it forever, and they do it very well, but not in the traditional enterprise space, which is quite some while back. Now, here in the sessions, I've understood you've defined it as microservices running in a containerized ecosystem, and Kubernetes and all of that. But is it within the scope, and perhaps as I said, it touches on the question asked previously, but is it in the scope of CNCF to outline what those design principles are? Microservices themselves have been a fairly recent, so in the last 1 or 2 years, it's begun to become popular, with Netflix cited as a reference, in most cases. But there hasn't been a very clear design principle definition of, this is what microservices mean.
Yeah, and this comes back to alignment on what is cloud native and what are these applications. Does anyone want to take a bite at that one?
I'm happy to take that one. So it's awesome to hear from an end user, Vodafone, I believe.
Yep.
Big enterprise, huge telco company actually voiced something that we were talking about earlier, which is like, how do you codify? Is it codify or codify? I think both are valid.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes.
How do you codify like what cloud native or microservices means in the application development stage? So as you have people writing code and building out a set of services, building their application and pushing it somewhere, you know, at the writing the code stage, all the way through to CI/CD and using all of these distributed systems frameworks like Kubernetes and Mesos and others. Like, how do we, as cloud native, start to translate that to customers in a pragmatic way so that it can be understood from an engineering perspective all the way through to the business value in these things? So one weird, crazy idea that I had around this was, I think this is like a fair statement to sort of say that microservices and a lot of these distributed systems ideas that are kind of becoming popular and why cloud native is getting so interesting is because of this sort of pseudo, you know, reincarnation of SOA, but at a different level of abstraction and at a different level of, obviously, time and history, you know, the rise of the internet, new protocols, new languages, and so on. But I still think a lot of these fundamental problems have been thought about previously and actually, you know, really, you know, investigated and codified. So I actually looked at this book that was written called Enterprise Integration Patterns. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it at all. So yeah, awesome, wow, shaking your head. Acknowledging, yes. And I think EIPs, so it was written by a guy named Gregor Hoppe, and they sort of actually codified like all of the models of message passing between systems in SOA architectures, which were primarily based on service bus technologies, doing point-to-point connection between applications using publish and subscribe messaging architectures. You know, how all these different patterns could be codified using intelligent routing, mediation, translation, and brokering of messages between services. And all of these things are very well codified, and they actually are the sort of reference playbook for how the technologies have been implemented against them. So things like TIBCO and WebSphere and on and on and on in the $20 billion SOA industry, right? Which is now in decline because we're seeing these new patterns. I think we can actually take a lot of lessons from that, and we're starting to even see maybe some subliminal lessons taken from that. So there was actually some distributed systems patterns papers done recently by Brendan Burns and David Oppenheimer at Google around scatter-gatherer and the ambassador pattern and these other things that are actually like direct, you know, mirrors of what actually was written by Gregor Hoppe in 2003, over a decade ago.
So we don't need to repeat ourselves.
I don't think we need to take these things like
literally
verbatim and apply them to the cloud native container space, but there's a lot of lessons there. So I think that would actually help. I think I was talking with Alexis Richardson about this a while back. I think it could be actually something very much so in scope inside the CNCF. So to kind of answer your question, that's my take on it, my personal take. But yeah, I think it's something we should do for sure.
And I can say on, you know, from the TOC side of things, right? The architecture starts with the application layer down, not the infrastructure up. And so we definitely see the value of focusing at the application, defining the primitives that matter to app development in a cloud native way. We need to look at the translations or the transformations or the integration patterns, or whatever new word you want to use that's an old word, right? The new is the old, and the old is the new always. So we have to kind of look at those patterns and see how do we define these application patterns. When you look at these patterns from a system engineering standpoint, which of these patterns overlap with other components, with other patterns, that we can kind of bring this into a known set of services that we can say, hey, if you have these services, like message buses, right? We know we need a message bus. You don't need to create another message bus. Just use one of these 8 or 9 that we already have, right? Not trying to pick one. I think 8 or 9's too many, but that's not my decision to make, right? Pick whichever ones you want. There's plenty of them. Don't create yet another one unless there's a pattern here that you need that we don't support. And then, hey, let us know. We might actually be able to create that pattern very easily without creating yet another project to create yet another message bus. And so
we've got just a few minutes left, and what I wanted to ask everybody on the panel is make one bold prediction about where CNCF will be in 1 year, 2 years down the road. So Ken, why don't you start down that end, and let's see.
Oh, man.
Definitely. So 1 year, I think we'll have a very well-defined architecture, hopefully, with a set of integration patterns and practices around how to incubate your project from an idea through to an actual cloud-native set of services and capabilities.
Okay.
And then in 2 years from now, I think we'll all be retired and drinking, Mai Tais on the beach.
There you go.
Aaron?
If we're going out 2 years, then I can just say flying autonomous cars, right? I mean, like 2 years is so far. I was having a conversation with some folks earlier today, and somebody said, so how many projects do you think are going to be in CNCF in this sort of near term, even like 6 months to 9 months? And I took the under. And it's not because I'm betting against CNCF. I think going back to something Chris said earlier, I actually think we have other sort of challenges and problems that we're trying to solve that are actually more valuable than just the sheer number of projects we have internally. So maybe if I was to make a bold bet, I'd say that we have maybe fewer projects than people might think in 6 to 9 months, but we've actually produced things that are far more valuable to the community and to CNCF as the definition of CNCF, which will be better for us long term. So.
All right. Doug, what's your prediction?
It's funny, in the prep for this, you said 3 to 6
Yeah.
months, I think, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I said
So
3
the entire time
months.
I'm up here, I'm thinking, okay,
3 months.
And I came up with something, but now you've pushed it out to a
Okay,
year.
well,
No, so what's funny is my answer for the 3 to 6 months was there's a lot of choices, a lot of confusion, a lot of bickering, and it's only going to get worse. Not that exciting, but that was going to be my prediction, it's going to get worse. But now that you push it out to a year to 2 years, I actually think in that time frame, I think things will start to settle down. So a little bit of prediction, a little bit of hope that within that time frame, the community inside CNCF will have figured out, CNCF will have gotten its legs by then, and we would have actually headed down that process of doing that harmonization and getting in more of an interoperability type statement that I was hoping that we'd actually get to eventually. I'm very impatient, so I'm anxious for it to get started. But it's a new organization. But I think within a year to two, I think we'll be along that way.
Okay. All right. From CoreOS perspective, Brad?
I think that CNCF will be successful when sort of these patterns that we're all kind of advocating get parroted back to us by the customers and users. Like one of the things that was kind of interesting around when cloud and paths were getting adopted is that there were certain application patterns that happened. People may not have been able to articulate what it was or the name of it, but you get into a room with them and they whiteboard exactly like the classic like 3-tier application pattern. And I think in a similar way, when people start to gain confidence with this stuff and they are able to confidently explain, like, this is how our application lays out, it's pretty standard. I think that's when we know that we've hit success. They may not ever say cloud native, but they will have understood and internalized the patterns.
Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has already been said. So I would kind of agree, unfortunately, I would kind of agree with Doug. I think the confusion is going to get, just sort of on the periphery of the project, probably going to get worse in the next 3 to 6 months. I hope it's not the case, but I think that's where things are sort of trending, unfortunately, right now. On the longer term horizon, which was your question, like 1 to 2 years, I mean, that is astronomically long period of time in this space. So,
But you're traveling at escape velocities.
it's true. We're reaching the event horizon here. Let's see. Wow, that is. I wouldn't even be presumptuous enough to make a prediction around where we're going to be in 1 to 2 years. But with this whole movement, I would hope that it's going to be very successful and that CNCF is going to be viewed as an industry-shaping, transforming entity for all this. But that's a hope.
All right, Chris, your bold prediction.
All right, in a year, I do think we will have some architectural clarity. I think we will have struggled through a lot of argument and come up with something that we can agree on from CNCF perspective. What are we building? And like I said at the beginning, started to identify some of those key services and most importantly, gaps. I think around that same time, we will have 100% utilization of a 1,000-node cluster. And I think we will have 5 anchor projects that are sitting in there being sort of continuously used as reference patterns. 2 years, and this is really bold, 2 years I think we will have figured out networking in container space.
You stole my heart.
Wow.
Precise answer.
Wow. That is a bold prediction, and I
We got this
hope you're
recorded,
right.
Yeah, that's right.
So I have one prediction that I'll make for 3 months out. In 3 months, November 7th, 8th, and 9th, that we'll all be in Seattle
There you go.
having this conversation again, and we'll be reiterating some of the themes, but hopefully we'll have more clarity on it. I hope you'll all join us at KubeCon
And I'll demo
Prometheus
some
Day.
container networking for
Yeah, and the networking will be done in 3 months, too.
Yeah.
My dream of dreams here. So I just want to thank all the panelists for coming today. And
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
hope you all join us in November in Seattle.